A few days ago, Ghostrunner released on Xbox, PlayStation, and Steam with a Switch release on the way as well. I had never heard of this game before until I saw it on Steam the day it released, where it happened to be on sale. So, I bought the game on a whim, and as you could tell by the title, I'm sure, it was unexpectedly fun. Alright, so what on earth is Ghostrunner? Well, imagine all the cool parts from Portal, Metroid Prime, Mirror's Edge, Black Ops 3, Katana Zero, the new Doom games, and even the Prince of Persia all thrown into one game. You play as this robot ninja in a cyberpunk world going around killing everyone in your sight as you parkour through the environment. All you have is a sword and certain upgrades that you unlock throughout the game, meaning that your kills need to be close range, encouraging fast-paced aggressive gameplay. Other than your sword and jumping, your main ability is a dash that while used in the air works as a time-stopping power which you can use to change your momentum mid-jump to dodge bullets or do whatever else you might want to do. The game is fairly hard, which I'll elaborate more on later, but once you start to master the game's controls, you'll be able to pull off ridiculous combos that make you feel like a real ninja. All of this accompanied by the cyberpunk aesthetic and synthwave soundtrack really ties up the gameplay experience nicely, making every movement in every level feel extremely polished and fun. But the aspect that really makes this game feel so satisfying is the fact that every enemy in the game dies in one hit, and so do you. The checkpoints are very generous, so you don't have to worry about repeating sections over and over too much, but with only being able to get hit a single time, this game is very unforgiving because one mistake and you're dead. Also, fair warning, you're going to see a lot of gameplay where I die over and over because while I'll mostly cut out the repetitive parts for you guys, I think it would be disingenuous to show only perfect runs on screen as if everyone who plays the game doesn't just spend half of the time dying in the same spot. So now that you guys have a basic understanding about what Ghostrunner is, it's time to get into the nitty-gritty of the video where I explain to you guys why it's so good. At least where I try to. Alright, now it's time for two of the most commonly used words in YouTube gaming videos. Level design. While I'm not Mark Brown, I am a random man on the internet, so that makes me credible, right? Speaking of Mark Brown though, he actually made a video on his channel, Game Maker's Toolkit, covering something relevant to this game, which was called Are Lives Outdated in Game Design? Where he goes over the pros and cons of having lives in video games, and I highly recommend you all check it out. But this is relevant because with Ghostrunner being extremely unforgiving and only giving you a single hit of health, there actually aren't any lives in the game. There is a death counter at the end of every level, which I personally think is a good alternative, still giving you a reason not to die. Well, other than the fact that you don't want to die. But something else good about this is how fast you respawn. Obviously, having lives in a game like this would be way too frustrating, or at the very least, restrict the level developers into making easier levels. But the balance they found in this no-life system is honestly perfect. There's pretty much a checkpoint before every major enemy encounter and every major parkouring section, meaning that you only need to do one section at a time. If this wasn't the case and you had to backtrack the entire long level, including whatever part you were stuck at every time you died, well, obviously that would suck. But this game has one of my favorite respawn systems in any video game ever. It's actually crazy. As soon as you die, you could press this button to respawn and that's it. No loading times, no nothing. You just respawn right before the section you're having trouble with, so you get to retry it without having to wait. This might seem too easy at first, but just trust me. The game designers designed the difficulty around this perfectly, so where it's still really hard. But you have so many checkpoints and you respawn so quickly that you never get frustrated to the point of quitting. I also want to let everyone know that despite buying it on Steam, I did use a controller. This is definitely a keyboard and mouse game, but I've happened to break my hands multiple times, so it feels more comfortable for me to use a controller. And despite Steam saying there's partial controller support, I can assure you it supported my controller the entire time through thick and thin. Now that I've talked your ear off about how the respawning system works, it's time to talk your ear off about the gameplay and other stuff you actually want to hear about. But first you gotta hear about today's video sponsor. Today's video sponsor is my own channel. I've been trying to upload twice a week and you guys really seem to be enjoying that, so I'm gonna try to keep it up as long as I can. So if you guys enjoy, please do subscribe because it helps out a lot, and leave a like on the video too because, back to Ghostrunner though. So what makes this game so cool? Well, it's actually kind of hard to describe because it's literally everything. The way everything in this game complements each other, from the art style to the level design to the gameplay, is just really well done and makes the experience as a whole really fun. But that's a horrible explanation, so let's break it down and start with the gameplay mechanics. There's no sprint button, which is honestly really nice because you'd probably be holding it down the entire time in the game anyway if there was one. You only go at one pace the entire game, but it is pretty fast, so it's not a problem. You can also jump, of course, and run on walls, which speeds you up. You can can also slide, which doesn't speed you up that much unless you're on a slope, in which case it turns into Mario 64. You also have this ability where you can freeze time for a small period of time, like I said earlier, which is the main ability of the game. And it shouldn't take much convincing outside of the gameplay that the combination of all the mobility techniques on top of the intense attacking time freezing stuff makes this game extremely fun. The enemies start off pretty easy and get harder as the game goes on. When I first played even the first level, it was extremely hard because I was getting used to the controls and stuff still. But going back to the first level and beating it again after already completing the game thanks to a really convenient level select, I was able to beat the first level extremely fast, which goes to show how far you can come in terms of mastering the mechanics of the game, which conveniently Mark Brown has another video on, which I definitely recommend. Ghostrunner also encourages really fast gameplay, so the more comfortable you get with the controls and the faster you play the game, the easier the game gets. Well, until they introduce another enemy. While some of the sections are extremely frustrating in terms of difficulty, the gameplay just feels so fun that restarting is never an issue. On top of it just being fun to run around trying to freeze time to kill enemies, the game design actually has multiple intended routes most of the time in terms of finding ways to kill groups of enemies, or even in the parkouring / platforming section sometimes too. Speaking of which, on top of the fighting mechanics being extremely fun to play, the platforming is also surprisingly well done. There's lots of wall running and grappling sections that remind me of some of the Black Ops 3 wall running stuff, along with even Metroid at times. Obviously, Ghostrunner isn't even close to being as open world as Metroid, but it has a lot of the fun aspects from the game, with not only the grappling hook sections being similar and fun, but also some of the environments even looking slightly similar to Metroid Prime, especially with some of the secrets looking like this. And with the seamless transitions from this fun platforming to the intense gameplay, the immersion is flawless. There are a lot of futuristic cyberpunk games, but with the action being as intense as it is, on top of all the mechanics being easy to use, this is obviously my favorite one. It does kind of look almost like Doom or Halo and feel like Portal sometimes even, especially in the elevator transitions after every level, but I think it's in a good way because this game is already unique for other obvious reasons. Also, the music in this game is phenomenal and really adds on to the atmosphere of the game. I've been playing it a little bit in the video for you guys to listen to, but if you want to hear more of it, I highly recommend you check it out on your own. Well, at least I think I put some of the music in the video because I haven't edited it yet. All of this being said, I obviously really loved Ghostrunner, but the game still has some flaws, of course, which I should probably bring up, right? Because that's what I'm supposed to do. One of the more complicated flaws that I honestly wouldn't even personally consider to be a flaw is the difficulty of the game. It's extremely hard. The developers knew there would be a lot of checkpoints, so they made sure to justify every single one of them. I personally didn't mind the difficulty all that much, which could just be due to me playing Crash Bandicoot and Mega Man recently, but I was still surprised with the difficulty. But I honestly didn't think this game was too hard. I liked that it was harder than I thought, but I know some people are going to say it was way too hard, and there were certainly some parts that were annoyingly hard for sure. For example, one of the enemies in this game are these weird looking things that act like creepers from Minecraft by running into you and blowing up. Several of the platforming sections in the levels have way too many of these things, especially with a character that dies in one hit. But apart from these stupid things, the rest of the difficulty was manageable for sure. But again, I was using a controller on Steam, so there is a chance my controls were slightly wonky, but I got through the entire game just fine, so I doubt it. The game's story is also slightly predictable. Story obviously isn't too important in a game like this, and the story isn't bad by any means, but as you play the game, I'm sure you'll see what I mean. The way the story presents itself though makes up for all that if you ask me, because there's no cutscenes in the entire game. It's mostly just quotes from the different characters in the game, cluing you in on what's happening as you progress further and further into the levels, which actually helps a lot with the immersion. There are also these really cool sections in this virtual world where you usually go before you unlock some sort of ability, and the ones in the beginning are kinda boring, but nothing too bad at all. One thing I don't like though is the fact that you can't dash here for some reason, which adds on to the fact that some of these levels are a little boring, but honestly it's nothing that big of a deal at all. Also, if you notice any weird low quality issues or FPS drops in my gameplay, it's because of my PC and not the game. My PC only has a 1050 Ti, which was doing the best it could while being recorded at the same time, but I assure you the game runs very smoothly and looks amazing the entire time. And of course, my settings weren't even turned up that high, so you can get way better graphics than even this if you really wanted to. The last major flaw I want to bring up though is the lack of extra modes outside of the main game. Obviously, this isn't something that's required for a game to be good by any means, but other than going back and getting some of the collectibles you missed out on or just playing for fun, there isn't a ton of incentive to play the game again once you already beat it. There are no challenges or time trial modes or even multiplayer modes, but the game also just came out, so who knows, maybe once it gets more support they'll add more things in the future. But I don't want it to seem like the game is bad at all though, and I don't want you to get confused by what I'm saying. Even with the lack of extra modes, there's still a lot of replayability. And maybe the only reason I even want extra modes is because I've been playing too much Mario lately. The collectibles and items that you find in the game can all be found on your first go through if you happen to spot them, so there's no required backtracking either. The collectibles also don't help you in any way as far as I'm aware. You can get audio logs that give you some more backstory and information on the world you're in, as well as some random artifacts with descriptions that usually are related to the place you found them in. My favorite collectibles though are the swords that you get. In every level there's at least one hidden sword, and you can customize it in the menu by choosing the one you want. It's purely cosmetic, and none of the swords have any upgrades, but a lot of them look really cool, and it's a well done incentive to encourage more exploration in the levels. Another thing that encourages replayability on top of the death counter for you to improve upon is a level timer as well. Obviously, speedrunning is something millions of people enjoy participating in and watching, so adding something as simple as a level timer and a leaderboard for you to improve upon whenever you want is really smart and adds a lot of replay value on its own. On top of the extra things in the game to add replay value though, if you go back to what I said about mastering the controls, doing that and going back to playing the older levels or even playing the later levels once you've beaten the game is really fun considering how rewarding it is. There are also some boss fights in the game, and I'll only talk about one due to spoilers, but they're all fairly easy for the most part. The one I'm going to talk about is called Hell. With one L. YouTube, please don't age restrict this. At first, it's really confusing what to do since you just get murked by her out the gate and attacking her does nothing. But it turns out you have to parry the attacks at a very precise timing several times in a row to get a chance to hit her, but once you figure that out, the fight is really fun and not too bad at all. The bosses also have their own entire levels, and with the handy level selector, you can go back and play every single boss by itself whenever you want once you beat it, which is something I really enjoy and think should be added to every single video game that has bosses. But regardless of all that, I think it's clear this game is amazing, and I highly recommend you guys all go check it out. This game really did catch me by surprise, and it really was one of the coolest games I've ever played. But seriously, remove the creepers in the next update. I'm serious. Those are the worst enemies I've ever seen in my life.